Good afternoon, everybody. This is Marty from Dog's Blog in the Noontime Report of the morning session of the Frank Carson et al. Trial. Today is January 18th, 2019. Originally scheduled for 9:15 a.m. And the judge was here at 9:15 a.m. Court was actually started around 9:30. Judge on the bench, we were opened up at 9:30, the judge on the bench at 9:32, and what we're doing this morning was, like we did yesterday, Robert Woody was put on the stand to listen to some recordings. The jury was not up yet. And the attorney Hans Gertsen thought he had quite a few recordings for Woody to listen to, but ended up only being about 3 and just took a few minutes because it was just like a minute or less of each recording, just wanting him to listen to his responses to some of the questions. And this is in regards to the 8/14 of 2015 interview with then Sergeant Domby of the CHP, he's a lieutenant now, and Steve Jacobson. They asked him about the Kurt Bunch interview where Robert Woody was talking about Scott McFarland, his concerns with his neighbors, who was Corey Kaufman, lived there along with the Pickett family, and asked him about his ass is grass comment and the threat that was made after the milk run to the church. He was asked if he was in a car with an Indian guy. Robert Woody says, yeah, I guess. And then he said he didn't know later on when he had changed his story. Robert Woody was also talking about driving on South Johnson Street, where he was a neighbor of Scott McFarland's. It was real brief. It was over with in just about 10 minutes, and the jury wasn't coming up until about 10:30. So we took a break, and about 10:32, the jury was up. Hans was doing a cross again on Robert Woody. He talked about 4 different statements in 2012, and also about the Miranda Dykes body wire, where he has told some lies to her and trying to impress her, and the 3/1/14 interview in the bathroom break when he was first taken into custody, and where he had made a statement while he was going to the bathroom, and then the transportation breaks, and that's where the areas that Hans was going into. I should restate that the area that Domby and Jacobson were going into. In that interview on August 14th of 2015, he was having trouble with recall, and he was pretty much being told what they know, and his responses were pretty much along the lines of, yeah, I guess, okay, if you say so. He told Domby that he could have made the statement that your ass is grass to Corey Kaufman. He said he could have, but he had no knowledge of it when they kept inquiring about it. And Robert Woody also made a statement to the investigators that you guys are pushing me into it to try to admit that. Domby and Jacobson were asking about how Corey Kaufman got to the Poppencourt property from the Frank Carson property. Robert Woody said he had no idea, and this is after some other statements that he had made. Robert Woody said he didn't know how he got to the forest either. He was asked about how he got to when he got to the Frank Carson property and the incident that was occurring. He imagined that Corey Kaufman was standing during the altercation. So again, he's saying he's not sure. This is, again, remember, this is the 8/14/15 interview that I'm giving his statements about, not what he's testified in court, because that's been different. He said that Daljeet Atwal was getting in on the altercation after they got there. Or actually, he was asked that, and Robert Woody said, I imagine so. In the day after the Frank Carson, the incident on Frank Carson's property, he said there was a injury on Daljeet Atwell's hand. He said that, testified to that during the trial. That was the first time that had been said. It was never mentioned to any investigators prior to court. Domby and Jacobson had asked if there were any injuries to Bobby or Dee Atwell, and Robert Woody said no. Domby was telling him he's got to meet me part of the way here to get information out. Woody didn't recall him saying that. He read the transcript, and Robert Woody said, correct, yes, that's what he said after reading the transcript. He also was asked if Corey Kaufman was bleeding. He says, well, I imagine so, was his response. And he also said that during that interview, he never saw any weapons. His response was, Hans is asking him, did you see any weapons? You told him you didn't see any weapons. He says, correct. This is how his responses are in court. He said he went home after the incident, said he did not tell anybody. And Hans asked him if he told Robert Bronco. He said no. Asked if he told Woodrow, which is his son. He said no. He was asked if he told Martin Baker during the break in the interview that the law enforcement officers are not doing very well or something to that effect. He didn't really recall this, and there was an objection by Marlissa Ferrer on some of that stuff, and I really didn't understand what was going on there, to tell you the truth. Domby had said something to the effect, asking or saying that he wanted to put a stop to the attack. He was unable to stop it. This was a statement, not a question, by Domby, as how the interview went. After the incident at the property, Domby asked him if he loaded up the body and drove it over to the Poppencork. He said correct. And then they took it to the mountains. Robert Woody's response was, they did, not me. So he was saying that Daljeet and Baljeet, the Outwalls, had moved the body that night of the Carson incident, not him. Domby told him that the body was not moved that night. The cell phone information does not show any mountain trips. Again, Robert Woody had to read the transcript to refresh his memory, and he agreed to what Domby had said. Or that's what Domby had said. Robert Woody said they did not bury anybody on the property to Domby and Jacobson. Then he said later on that initially the body was at Poppencork for a short while, and the truck was burned on 4/27 in 2012. Robert Woody said that he had taken some dirt from the Poppencork. He'd taken some dirt from the Frank Carson property somehow, I don't know when, and took it with him to the mountains. Then he said it was from Poppencork. It was really confusing. It was hard to follow. He put it on top of the tarp, some in the tarp and some on top of the tarp, to keep the tarp weighted down, and he felt that it would be evidentiary value of some sort. This guy has a strange line of thinking. He also said that he had put some dirt inside the tarp when he had buried the body at Poppencork. He said, but it was not much. Just a handful was scooped up and put in the tarp with the body. For some reason, that was really not explained why he thought that. And then he had closed up the tarp and buried the body. He had actually also buried the body after, or he took body after digging it up and they put it in the truck to go up to the mountains. This is what he was being told. This is not what he was saying. Later, they moved the body again, talking about going to the mountains, and any dirt taken from Pompincourt, he said no, there was not. Only from dirt from Frank Carson's property was taken. So he said a couple different things in that interview. Not today, he's just saying correct. He's not really saying anything. He's just kind of agreeing with Hans, which is what he does in interviews and stuff. He told investigators he had taken the body via the truck. Actually, they told him, and he just said he agreed with them. Was the tarp tied down? Robert Woody said the dirt had held down the tarp in the bed of the truck. He piled a lot of dirt on top of the tarp, so it went from a scoop full of dirt that was inside the tarp to a lot of dirt that was thrown on top of the tarp when it was transporting to keep it weighted down. He also told investigators that he was in the back of the truck with a shovel as the truck was going down the road, throwing dirt out of the truck. And so to trip up the mountains, he was in the back of the truck with a shovel. I had to repeat it because I didn't believe it myself. He was in the back of the truck with a shovel, getting rid of dirt. I guess he thought there was an evidentiary, there could be evidence there, so he was throwing it on the side of the road or something. Domby had asked him to describe the area of the roads, the foliage and stuff, and Robert Woody had said he parked on an asphalt road at the scene where they got rid of the body. Robert Woody had been to the scene prior to the Domby interview and the prelim, and now the trial. And I believe when he was asked that, I believe there was a second interview or something, because it was a day after the 8/14/15 interview that August 15th is when he did the walkthrough of the alleged crime scenes. He talked about he had washed his hands in a spigot on the side lot after he'd cut the fingers and toes off the body, and he put the fingers and toes inside the tarp. So he cut the fingers and toes so the body couldn't be identified, didn't take teeth or anything. But then, because he believed that fingers and toes have the same prints, if you take a toe print and a big toe print and a thumb print, they'll have the same print, so they can be identified to each other. And but then he just threw them in with the body, and then when he went to the mountains, he had scattered the fingers and toes around the area in a circle about 20 feet from where the body was. So he didn't want the body to be identified, but he threw the fingers and toes out where the body was. He had made a comment or agreeing, I'm not sure which, that the Outlaw brothers he saw them later with different clothing on that night after the Carson incident, but he never saw them change clothes, and all he did was wash his hands off on the spigot in the lot outside. He was asked about the April of 2016 statement to Martin Baker and the private investigator, where Woody said they both had changed clothes, so there was a little discrepancy on that. Remember, this is the infamous attorney statement that was waived privilege later on to protect Beverly Woody when she was allegedly perjuring herself on the stand. And he said he previously had told the attorney he previously lied about the clothes change. He had to again read some transcripts to review, as he was having trouble remembering these things. He told Martin Baker the clothes change was a lie. He had told Domby and Jacobson that he had put the fingers and the toes, he'd thrown them in the river. Robin Attenhofer was with him, he said, when he threw the digits into the river somewhere. But he He said that Baljeet Atwal and himself went to the mountains, and he never said anyone else's a vehicle. He said he didn't want to get Robin Ettenhofer involved. This was his girlfriend at the time. She's since deceased. He didn't want to get her involved in this thing, but then told him that she was involved in taking the fingers and toes and throwing them in the river. He was asked about August 15th, 2015. This was the day after the Domby Jacobson interview, where he had talked to investigators, did a walkthrough, and this included Marlissa Ferreira was on the scene with him during the walkthrough of all the alleged crime scenes of the Carson property, Poppencork, and where the body was recovered in the mountains. In the interview the day before, he said that he had parked on asphalt in the mountains, and where the body was found, it was on a dirt road. Marlissa Ferreira objected because she's saying Hans is misrepresenting a little bit, because he had made statements that there was dirt and partial asphalt and gravel and stuff prior to that, but he keeps saying different things all the time anyway. On that August 15th, 2015 walkthrough, this was in the mountains. He told Steve Jacobs that, and while he was at Poppencourt, he had cut the fingers off, and it was his idea to do that because of the prints, the fingerprints and the toe prints. It could be incriminating. In the mountains, he said that he removed the body from the tarp. There were some items in the tarp. There was a bag. I think he's talking about the grocery bag. There was the blade that he used. He said to cut the fingers off, and he used a sheetrock knife to cut off the fingers and toes of the body. There were some rags. He said whatever was on the ground at Poppencork, he picked up and threw it in the bag, and then put it in the tarp. Again, he said that he told Jacobson that he had thrown the fingers and the toes around the area, about a 20-foot circle around where the body was left. He did not see any socks in the tarp up at the mountains when he removed the body, but the next day he had burned some rags, the knife. He was just trying to burn evidence. There were some things he didn't recall exactly what he was said in the interview and that day at the mountains and stuff, so he had to review transcript again. Then Attorney Hans asked if there's any residue from the fire, like there was a blade of the saw that wouldn't have burned. And he said he took the blade of the saw and he threw it in the trash. He said there were some rags that didn't finish burning. Now, he said that it burned about 3 minutes. He lit this fire. He poured gasoline on these items. He burned them to destroy evidence. And then he said it burned for about 3 minutes, and he threw water on it to put it out. So not everything burned. I noticed, too, that he was getting kind of hostile towards Han. He's getting tired of all these questions. And he said there was about 8 rags in the fire. He didn't count. He said that very sarcastically. And he said they were on the fire to destroy evidence. And then he put it out before the evidence was totally destroyed. So at around 11:55, the jury was sent out of the room for lunch. And Marlissa Ferreira, there was an issue from earlier that there was an objection that they were going to get back to. And Marlissa Ferreira says Attorney Hans was misdirecting what Robert Woody said about the fire. And Hans said he was asking a question. He was not referring to his statement or asking if that was a true statement. He was asking a question about the fire and what he did and how he put it out. And Judge sustained the objection, saying that's the way that Hans put it. And, I'm sorry, I agreed with Hans on this one. That's not what he said, but that's the way the judge saw it. Also, Marlissa Ferreira had some notations of where Robert Woody had previously said it was a dirt road He gave a description of a dirt road going up to the mountains, and there were certain in the transcripts and interviews and such that she gave those citations, and she'd given those to the court. And that was where we broke for lunch, back at 1:30. And don't forget, we have the podcast tonight at 6 o'clock, and we'll see if I think Attorney Hans will be done with Robert Woody this afternoon, and I believe the Jaya Gohel is going next.